Hello, I'm Daniel Stonecipher with Engineering Trust Boundaries and a board member of the IT community of IFMA. We welcome you to day one of the FM Tech Week 2026, presented by Schneider Electric. This session is brought to you by my good friends Paul Doherty at the Digit Group, and I can't tell you how excited I am to introduce him to share some wonderful insights through his session titled The Persistence of Data, AI, Digital Twins, in the Internet of Buildings. I appreciate everyone joining us from around the world today. And Paul, let's jump right in.
Well, thank you very much, Daniel, and thank you for saying nice things about me. Your $20 is in the mail. So with that, my name is Paul Doherty. I'm a IFMA fellow, very proud of that. But I wanted to just shake things up here a little bit, just to kick things off, because I am one of the, okay, here we go, one of the largest Knick fans in the world, if you can't tell. And the fact that they did this little thing this past Saturday night, I figured we actually take the first 15 minutes to actually go through a repeat of that game. Oh, okay. But I knew we were going to win anyway, because look who's the fans, right? If they weren't going to win, they were going to win. You know what I'm talking about? There we go. So with that, who am I? Well, I am part of IFMA and became a fellow because of a couple of things. One of the things was about the technology, right? I am the guy that was behind a team that created Revit. And got purchased by Autodesk, which then turned into this amazing career that had me involved with other technologies, trying to stitch together the workflow of what a capital asset is as you build it, and then how do you operate it after it's built. So that's why I'm involved with facility management. I actually started the Shanghai chapter way back, and because of all that, they elevated me to be an ambassador about FM. So I'm also a guy that helped create a technology called TRIRIGA, which got bought by IBM. So I've had my fingers in some very, very fun things on the technology side of things. But on the professional side of things, actually doing the work, I am a designer. I'm a licensed architect, but I was also got then involved with building and then ultimately real estate development using technologies. So I've been known for this thing called smart cities. And the mass media has been very, very kind to me, Forbes, CNBC, Bloomberg, Wall Street Journal, about the work that we're doing in places like China and in the Middle East. So this is going to be more of a global perspective about what I'm seeing overseas, what I'm seeing here in the US, and more importantly, you're going to hear a lot of name dropping. I'm not doing that to impress anybody, but there was a documentary made about me. It was a very good movie, and it was called Forrest Gump. Because quite frankly, I don't know how I get involved with some of these things. It's like, okay, I guess that happened. So you're going to hear some names, you're going to hear some situations. Just know Forrest Gump. So with that being said, this is where I got my start. Butts and elbows up in the air in drafting rooms, right? Being able to get the conditions right for doing drawings by hand, and then being able to have another experienced designer maybe come up behind me and ask what I was working on. Because maybe my lettering was off that day, or maybe my dimension lines just weren't touching right. And we would just start talking. And that's how I learned, was actually through conversation, right? And these conversations were very, very special because I learned what not to do sometimes instead of what to do. So taking that approach, I also got then involved way early on in the late 80s with a technology called AutoCAD, which was just like an electronic pencil. And it was cool. It was great. I learned a lot. It was amazing that the AIA came up with CAD layering guidelines 12 years after all this stuff launched. Good timing, right? But something was always itching me, because doing an electronic pencil is one thing. But then I got introduced to this organization. They actually recruited me out of Cambridge, Massachusetts. And they were an interesting group because they were doing what was called 3D parametric CAD. What an awful name. We renamed it Building Information Modeling. We actually renamed the company. It was called Charles River Software, and we renamed ourselves Revit. And what I thought about what was interesting about this was we work in 3D, we live in 3D, we draw in 3D, but how come we don't communicate in 3D? And still to this day, when you go out to a job site, it's amazing how many Revit models are actually put back into 2D. So we have a lot of stuff that we still need to work on. We have issues, right? But it's okay because now what I'm seeing is that a lot of the grunge work is being taken care of by algorithms and large language models that can help stitch together what would be a good set of construction documents, which then leads to a very good set of working documents out in the field, and then ultimately into as-builts, which I've yet to see a perfect set of as-builts, but that's okay because we're starting to learn better about how to, again, communicate. So during COVID, I reread the biography of Leonardo da Vinci, which I still find fascinating. But he said something very profound that helps me when I need my North Star to learn how to see again. Because he says, realize that everything is connected to everything else. And once we understand that, I think we can start to see how the newer technologies that are emerging, things like digital twins, things like artificial intelligence, things like the Internet of Buildings, start to come together and stitch their way into coming up with maybe a better way of managing space, maybe a better way of operating buildings, and most importantly, how do we create a better environment for the human condition? So, right, what I'm looking at right now is this shift where buildings are moving just from the static asset world into being part of a living system, meaning that the data that flows through it is now almost more important than the actual brick and mortar itself, if that makes sense, because it's a representation of what is in reality, in real life, as the kids say, right? So now we have this idea of, well, if there's continuous data, that makes a lot of people feel uncomfortable because usually we want to get a report. We want to get something solid so that we slow down the data. And this is an interesting time because what I'm looking at data is it's a great story. Well, it's storytelling on steroids, right? And now there's these new terms like digital twins, which is not BIM, by the way. Digital twin does not need to be a 3D representation. It helps and it's one of the components, but the digital twin, again, is a representation of what's in real life, which means that we're looking at a new medium, an entire new medium, which means that we need to start to rethink how we start to touch the data and how we use it. I'm learning from my two 15-year-old sons. They are the natives in this world, and we're the immigrants, right? Because our habits of the past are giving way to their behaviors of the future. I really thought that we were going to have a problem during COVID because they were like in sixth grade at the time, right? Fifth and sixth grade. And they were learning on Zoom, right? And I'm going, oh my goodness. I know, like here in the US, the public school system, the academic part is only half of the education. The other half is social, right? Who the jerks are, who the good guys are, blah, 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 blah. But I should have listened to the who more because the kids are all right. I really thought that they were going to be not, but they are all right because they are learning how to be involved in the digital world and in the physical world all in the same breath. And I blame gaming in a good way. It's a good blame. Because when you start to take a look at how they started to evolve during COVID, they started out with Minecraft, they graduated to Roblox, and finally they wound up with this thing, Fortnite, right? And what was cool about Fortnite is that it really is a social environment, right? Because games never end. It's when you log in, either with your friends or you make friends, that's your time there until you log off, but the game still exists. Isn't that the built environment? It is always there. Our participation in your building, in your campus, in your home is for a finite amount of time. So when I started to take a look at how they interacted and they would make fun of, one kid or they would, all find a leader in order to go out on these missions and whatnot. I fast forward to today, they're in Boy Scouts right now and they act the same way in real life as they do in the gaming world. I didn't have to worry. They are socially adept. They know what they're doing. It's just that I was looking at this as something from the outside when I should have been looking inside. So we have a lot to learn about our environments. What is digitized? What is physical? And when you blur them, I think that's when the magic happens. So how do you interface with this new medium? It's no longer just a mouse. It's not just a touch screen with your finger. It's not a stylus. Sometimes we're starting to learn that we can actually create ourselves as avatars. And this is our last generation's view of what an avatar was. You can be anything, right? But what I'm looking at is what Epic Games is doing with a lab out in San Diego called MetaHuman, run by my friend Gabriella. This is her medium interface. This is her avatar, which is a humanoid. These metahumans are remarkable. She's wearing a GoPro camera and she's actually going through this exercise to teach through AI her representation digital of how that person's going to act inside of a digital environment, right? Kind of looks like her. She can be anything she wants with this, a superhero, whatever. But the bottom line is she's interfacing with the medium differently. She's actually going through an exercise now that there's a script that starts to take her decisions and her emotions and put that into her avatar. Meaning that when you actually have those decision making ways of working, when you go home at night, she can actually then have her avatar interface with other avatars in order to do back office things like what AI is good at, right? All the grunge work, all that type of thing inside of her digital twin. So when I take a look at this, I'm like, where could this go? Well, why this matters is because our traditional systems are fragmented, right? Siloed. There's no system level intelligence that exists today. Remember what I said about continuous data? Well, when you take AI and you can start to train it in a certain way, like what Gabrielle is doing with her avatar to interface with traditional systems, now we're putting in a layer of intelligence that hasn't existed before. And this isn't just about API calls and things like that. It's about how can we take that intelligence and actively have it work for us. So again, we don't got to deal with with all the grunge work. Because in my opinion, AI is something that should be your companion. I love that Microsoft calls it Copilot because that's the vision that I see AI really helping. They're not an oracle. They don't have all the answers, especially when you go up there and you realize that's not right. This thing's hallucinating. Of course it is, because it's scraping information off of things that humans built. And of course, humans are perfect, right? Yeah, right. So now all of a sudden we have this persistence of data, this continuous data across a life cycle, moving from pre-design into design to build, to operate, to optimize. What we're looking at is not to have to reset all over a handover during each one of those phases. So the life cycle is going to be contingent and rely upon the persistence of trusted data. This means that we have a convergence, meaning that we have an operational intelligence layer that's created by converting these large language models with certain forms of AI, because it's not AI everything. I've tried just about everything. I use ChatGPT for fun, but I use Claude Pro. Why? Because it works and it knows me. It understands what I'm looking for, how I'm working. Because why? Because I've trained it that way, right? And there's others out there, and there will continuously be others out there. And that's why, when I take a look at, some people where they're just focused in on it and they rely so much on ChatGPT, and it looks like ChatGPT. I think you all know what I'm talking about, right? It has that structure. It's got, emoticons now instead of words and arrows saying, instead of using the word to. There are telltale signs, about that. With Claude, not so much, right? It helps me get an understanding so that I, as a human, can make a better informed decision. Meaning that when I'm putting together my digital twins, do I want to put it into a global digital model, like a cesium model, things like that, a Google Earth model? Why would I want to do that? Well, because that is how I'm categorized. That's how I'm classifying my data. We'll get back to that in a second. But what all this does, when I have data that I trust and it's in a continuous flow where AI is assisting me with the management of that, what to alert me for, we're now looking at the emergence of the Internet of Buildings. Meaning that when a building can actually have this type of intelligence into it, and I can connect those buildings together, something special really, really, really happens. Meaning that we have no longer just a static visualization model, right? That's sitting there. I mean, yeah, it looks cool. It's kind of cartoonish, in a way sometimes, especially using BIM. But tomorrow, we're actually looking at a real-time predictive system, meaning that the building can start thinking on itself and understand the simulations very quickly and then communicate that back to the human that needs that information. So when I take a look at what they're doing at Changi Airport in Singapore, this is what I mean about convergence. They're looking at a single source of truth. And with the number one airport in the world, they must be doing something right. So Twin Matrix is the group that is managing this with over 32 siloed systems. Again, that fragmentation that's taken the data and having it do something else. In other words, we can actually now have it have collision control, right? Both digitally, internally, and out on the ramp between airplanes, between equipment, all these different things, because it's now aligning itself with robotics in the real world. This is what Jensen Huang, the CEO of NVIDIA, was talking about. We're talking about the physical AI. this spatialized AI. It's no longer just in a chat GPT type world. We can actually implement this now out in the field. And that's how Changi keeps on raising the level and constantly every year being number one because of the customer experience, the client experience. And isn't that what FM is all about? It's not about managing the building. It's about managing expectations and providing inspiration, providing safety, of course, and security for your customers, the actual workers inside of those buildings, the customers that are at an airport. And how do we make things live? So that's what I wanted to show you here, where we have, a real example, Changi Airport, that's taking all these different siloed pieces of information and creating an intelligence layer so that there's a better customer experience. So when I'm talking about these Internet of Buildings, because as you saw there, there's different terminals, right? And they all work with each other. This means that the buildings are functioning as a connected network of nodes, meaning that the data flows across those systems horizontally so that the assets and the environments become, well, they level up, to use a gaming term, right? Here's one example of what I mean by that. I mean, this is very chat GPT of me, but it just shows where all the different silos are and where the building now becomes the router. Isn't that interesting? Where we're now looking at the data flows where the building becomes a computer. Once that happens and the flows start to make decisions, again, for safety, uh, you know, security first, like with those two, but then into other type of user experiences. I mean, I took a look at what BlackRock did in Manhattan, where they took all of their disparate different offices, and just lately they converged it into one building, and that building is interactive. Lutron Electronics did some amazing, well, Lutron Lighting did some amazing work where it has sensors that understand each individual worker's or pool of workers' needs are because it learns over time through AI and then creates that as a better experience. It could be lower lighting, it could be brighter lighting, it can be different things of airflow, it could be using the curtains or the shades in certain ways because of how that becomes a unique experience. So we are in the experience economy and the Internet of Buildings. When you start to take square blocks or campuses, now things get special. We're just starting to scratch the surface in our smart cities about what we're learning, right? About, well, what happens when this building's over here and this building's over here and they start to share? And again, safety and security first. And what happens if there's an active shooter? It wouldn't be really interesting then for those buildings to coordinate because it has CCTV cameras, it has eyes, it has shot stopper, the ears, and it knows that that person's going into a foyer that I can then do a lockdown lockout where once that shooter goes in through the first door, he's not going to get through the second door because those are locked, and then you lock the first door. Guess what? The building's just caught the perpetrator. Very, very simple example. It works, and we're having a ball just thinking about what else we can do. So in the spirit of time, the role of FM and AI really transforms building data into decisions by humans. I can't stress that enough. There's going to be certain things that I'll trust in the future where I'll let it make certain decisions that will affect it in the physical AI space. But the idea of prediction, optimization, and automation, that's still up to us as the facility managers, as the operators. But what gets really interesting about this is the enablement, right? Because now I'm in control. It's not AI's doing wacky hallucination things. No, 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 no. We're actually now looking at these worlds of siloed technologies, be it BMS or BIM or IWMS, anything like that. Well, I saw the software industry die during spring break when one of my sons asked if he could use my Claude Pro. I said, yeah. And three of his other friends, so it was four kids in ninth grade, they reverse engineered Adobe Acrobat. And then what they did was they made it very, very light because they got rid of all the null statements and all that crap. Then what they did was they changed and tweaked the actual source code so that it was not a copyright infringement, so that their high school had a freeware version of Acrobat. That scared the crap out of me because in ninth grade, I was eating dirt. What are these kids doing? So, this idea of software reverse engineering is real. Between Ghidra, DeepSeek, of course, Claude, Reforce, these things are real. And I'm watching so many different, including Revit and AutoCAD and everything else, being attacked. When you have CEOs of these software companies saying, well, we have a moat of 36 months, they're more or less saying, let's interpret this. So your moat is giving you 36 months to reinvent yourself. What are you doing? Right? So at the end of the day, what you just said is that you're going to be out of business in 36 months. And some of these are publicly traded companies. Have you seen the stock fall in some of our industry's largest software companies? Amazing. This stuff is happening, which means that we need to be prepared. So, how does this really work? What is AI? I'm going to show you a graphic AI one I like. It's called Midjourney. It sits on the Discourse platform, and you have to learn prompting to actually make this thing work. It's kind of like asking a questions and you're sharpening the sword every time to get to something. So I decided to try it. And again, this is a graphic AI, and that's what the output is. So I wanted to see, well, okay, here it is. And in this particular AI engine, the prompt always starts with slash imagine. And then you put in where that word prompt is what you want to see. So I said, okay, imagine me, Paul, as Batman. And this is what it gave me. Oh, I hate AI sometimes. But this is an example of where now you need to be better about what questions you're asking so that you can get the proper results. That's one way, and probably the 1.0 version of AI. It's accelerating so much that if you were a software company and had first mover advantage, usually then you became a king, like Autodesk or groups like that, right? Today, if you're the first AI, you're dead because it's going to get overwritten 2 weeks later. So that's why we have this thing called agentic AI, which means that you have certain tasks and functions. And when you put them together like a stack, it's called an MCP. Now all of a sudden, you have something that can emulate software, but yet be disposable because the next one that comes around, plug it into the stack. It's an amazing period. We have to rethink and reimagine how we're going to do it. So, what does this mean for FM? Well, in this case, it's predictive maintenance. That's an easy one, right? Reactive repairs, predictive alerts, uh, and of course, reduce downtime and cost. That is a great measure. Another good measure, energy optimization, where we can actually have the buildings have a relationship with the energy grid. It's carbon aware, it's demand responsive. These are really, really special things, especially when you start getting into batteries. Because now we're looking at battery energy storage solutions, or BESS, as the next big thing. Because now all of a sudden you can be creating energy, store it, and then pull it out when you need it. Right now, between the corridor between Dallas and Houston, that's what they're doing. They're putting up these energy storage systems to help with brownouts and all those different things. Because as those peaks and valleys come, your battery now starts to level set it. So you're not getting the big spikes and all those things. Of course, virtual power plants. Right, being able to have your roof now connect to another building, the Internet of Buildings, so that you can actually now have a collective of solar panels that have batteries stored. And when you stick them together, imagine if Los Angeles would do this with the rebuild. You'd have a 60 megawatt power plant just on the roofs themselves with renewable energy, right? And then, of course, the autonomous buildings, being able to have, a two-way or bi-directional way of having your EV car actually plug in so that you again level set the neighborhood, that particular block, that particular building. Fantastic new ways of seeing energy being used and reused with this new model of convergence, AI, digital twins, and the Internet of Buildings. So the operating model shift really goes from these siloed teams into data-driven operations, right? Where our decision making is creating a new asset class, meaning that this intelligence layer is actually the most valuable asset of that building because it's learning every day of how to best optimize itself. It will work with you, and now all of a sudden, like your cost center becomes something that wow. Now all of a sudden, it's really starting a return where the building is not just the brick and steel anymore. It's about the intelligence that runs them, and there will be organizations out there that will actually put a monetary figure. So when you sell your building, one of the most valuable assets of that building is, well, let me see what your building is in that intelligence layer. Amazing times. So the future state, and I'll start wrapping up here, is this idea of autonomous self-optimizing buildings where we have continuous commissioning and adaptation so that again just like with disposable software and get another AI agentic solution into your stack. Well, we're actually now looking at putting even further intelligence into this where we'd have buildings with personality. So imagine now we have this world where, we have Siri and we have, uh, you know, uh, um, just all these different, humanoid ways of interfacing with a smart speaker, right? Well, what I'm looking at now is why can't we do that with our buildings? If we already have this intelligence layer that's sitting on top of your BMS and all these other systems, and it's learning every day. Wouldn't it be really cool to take, like, let's say, the community college system in California and look at all the different buildings, and everyone has a storage system. So that's kind of like an introverted, personality, right? Because not a lot of stuff happens there, not a lot of people in there, as opposed to a high performance lab, which we gave a personality of that with the voice of a valley girl, like, oh my God, right? Because it's crazy, everything's going around, as opposed to a classroom, a very statesman-like classroom where we put the voice of a Oxford professor, calm and all that type of stuff. So putting personalities, putting the right types of personalities, including the emotions and voices, this is the next phase of our future state of how we're going to be seeing the rise of what we're calling urban AI, where it's no longer just smart cities and having that type of thing, but into intelligent cities where it has a personality, where we're starting to see stronger resilience, better decision making, just for the people in the buildings, and of course with governance. Right. And of course, the high quality of life is something that we always strive for, which in our world, we're measuring with economic growth because cities are still competing against each other. So why am I in the Middle East a lot? A lot. It's because that's where we're starting to implement these things. So with that, let me show you a couple of projects. Here's one in the Middle East. This one is the New Macabre. This was designed by Atkins. I was their consultant on this. It's a 400 meter by 400 meter cube. It's supposed to emulate what goes on with the Hajj down in Mecca, except that this is meant to be what my kids are already living. We're taking the digital world and we're implementing it through things like holograms and other types of human experiences to be inside of a physical space. So again, the physical world meeting the digital world, that is unprecedented. This thing can hold 20 Empire State Buildings. That's how large this volume is. And we play with it because it understands who I am coming into this thing, and it will always learn to give me different experiences, through retail, through F&B, through hospitality, in ways that we've never even thought of before. This will be completed by 2030. It's meant to be an icon of Riyadh in the same way that Paris has the Eiffel Tower, there's Big Ben in London. This will be the new face of Riyadh. One other one that I want to show you quickly is this. This is a studio city in outside of Seoul, South Korea. This is again one of those digital meets physical spaces. We are using LED instead of green screen to actually project a lot of the backgrounds of shows, TV shows, movies, that type of thing. If you've seen season 2 of this scary, scary show, I am 456. So Squid Game was actually shot there, and I'm pretty proud of that I actually escaped as 456. So with that, I like to wrap this up and say, hey, I have books, but right now the way that I'm looking at it is that I don't make money on these books, but everything I just talked about, there's further detail. It is available up on Amazon. This one is Smart Cities. We do have another one called Unlocking the Metaverse. So there are a lot of these ideas in the books if you want to learn more. And plus, we have a podcast with my partner in life. He's my business partner, Marbu Dennis, one of the best people on the planet. And we call ourselves twins. You can see why, right? He's 7 foot tall. 7 foot tall, right? And I'm like 5'8". So yeah, but we talk about business just in a different way of an elevated state. So with that, my name is Paul. Feel free to check out my LinkedIn. Let's connect, and just best of luck to all of you. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Paul. That was a great conversation as always. And thank you for sharing those incredible insights. Truly amazing. And I'm sure you've got the audience really thinking about what's possible and what's coming up next. I appreciate everyone joining us today. I look forward to seeing you during our next FM Tech Week session, which is today at 11 p.m. or 11 a.m. rather Pacific time, with Rachel Walls from the Bridge Group and James Waddell from the Cognitive Corp. Thank you again, and have a great day.
Let's go, Knicks.